The Trump regime has now expanded their mass deportation scheme to go from the criminal illegal alien variety to now actively and aggressively talking about stripping citizenship from American citizens and deporting them to El Salvador. This is a tipping point. And when you think about the acceleration into authoritarianism that the Trump administration is talking about, we need to consider some of the things that have happened as a result. One of the interesting things that's happened as this escalation has continued, as we've seen citizens being disappeared in broad daylight by armed and masked assailants who are kidnapping people, what have we seen happen with scholars of tyranny? One of the things that's interesting is that Tim Snyder, along with 4 other leading academics in the area of fascism and tyranny, they have left the US, their prestigious teaching positions, and moved to Canada. And Tim Snyder, in his book, actually warns us about several things that we need to be watching out for. He notes in chapter 3 of his book on tyranny to beware of the one-party state. He notes that as the institutions of democracy fall, what you will see is a shift of major parties to align with the dominant party in power. He notes that the parties that remade states and suppressed rivals were not omnipotent from the start. They exploited a historical moment to make political life impossible for their opponents. So support the multi-party system and defend the rules of democratic elections. Vote in local and state elections while you can. Consider running for office. He mentions that early in chapter 3 of his book on tyranny. And what that means for us is that we will likely see, as power increases with the Trump regime, the Democratic Party become more and more aligned with what the Republican Party is pushing. And it's up to us as the citizens to be as vocal as possible and aggressively fight against that trend. One of the other things that we need to watch out for, he talks about in chapter 6 of his book, be wary of paramilitaries. And this is something to pay attention to given Trump's alignment with all sorts of white nationalist groups, the Proud Boys, the One Percenters, the Three Percenters, Patriot Front, Oath Keepers. All of these entities have been lined up behind Trump, dating all the way back to 2014. And they've only been emboldened since his re-election. And the first thing that he did was pardon all of the domestic terrorists that were arrested, pled guilty, and imprisoned coming out of J6. That is a signal to his minions to stand back and stand by. And here's where we need to consider how this could be deployed. There are rumors going around that Trump plans on activating and invoking the Insurrection Act. Now, the logistics of declaring martial law under the Insurrection Act are pretty insurmountable. You're thinking about a population of 340 million people that need to be controlled under martial law. One way that you can add a force multiplier is to encourage local and statewide law enforcement in conjunction with the military and National Guard to deputize white nationalist groups to extend their reach and get the citizenry under control. This is what we need to watch out for. And this is where the protest becomes critical. This needs to be a show of force. The April 5th protest generated over 5 million protesters in the streets. All future protests needs to surpass that number across the country as a bulwark against these paramilitaries being activated. When we are looking at what is happening within our country and what the Trump regime is trying to pull off, it is at the citizen level that the resistance needs to be focused. We cannot rely on the institutions to hold. And in fact, we've seen many institutions already cave under the pressure exerted by the Trump regime. So it becomes incumbent on every citizen who is not a Nazi sympathizer, who is not a Nazi collaborator, who is not a Nazi apologist, to stand up, boldly and firmly in opposition to what is coming. Because failure to do that is going to lead to the circumstances that the Germans of the 1930s and 40s dealt with as the failed Austrian painter consolidated power. That is what's happening right now. The failed businessman, the insurrectionist, the traitor, the coward, draft dodger, and rapist is trying to consolidate power to bring forward his version of the ideal state, where it's him on top and everybody else trying to bend the knee in order to get crumbs. Stay vigilant, stay active, push back, fight back, punch back.